let's see, where were we when I asked you to pause? You're talking about, like, your daily routine, especially, like, going through elementary school. Like, you would go home for lunch?
Every day we'd come home for lunch because it was just across the street. And my mother would have a beautiful meal prepared, all the things that you would now call most unhealthy, gravies and dumplings and occasionally fried food.
Sounds like quite a lunch there.
Oh, that was dinner.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember eating anything later on at night, but I'm sure we did, right? Maybe we finished up something, right?
So
and,
put it over here.
We'd have a nice meal and then go back to school. And when in the late 30s, when my father had his first heart attack, that stopped. We would eat a healthy meal, broiled fish or meat and lots of fresh vegetables, and forget about the gravies and the dumplings. Right?
Now, were these, like, gravies and dumplings, things that, you know, your mother would have had prepared for her back in Czechoslovakia, or was it?
I would say they were the dumplings and the gravy certainly, but I don't think they ate that sumptuously in Czechoslovakia. No. I don't think so.
In terms of resource availability.
There's an outlet back there, Bob, behind the drapery there.
Oh, okay, that'll work.
And
Right there in the...
so, when you started sort of eating different foods, do you think those were like things that she necessarily probably wouldn't have eaten over in Czechoslovakia, or was that?
Well, we always ate healthy plus the unhealthy. So we just had to cut out the unhealthy. I mean, we always had plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables. Huh?
Do you guys have a garden? You had a garden next to the bakery, right?
Yes. The vegetable garden, you mean? Yes, that we had. Just mostly tomatoes, I think. I don't remember much of anything else there. Of course, we had the place up at the farm later, where we had all the other larger amounts of corn and potatoes and green beans and strawberries, raspberries,
Now, what year was
asparagus.
What year was the farm completed?
When it first came into being?
Yeah.
Well, about 1938, probably.
Did you guys spend, about how much time did you spend up there? Was it like a once a weekend thing, or was it
No, we'd more likely be there during the week when it wasn't so busy at the bakery. Weekends were always at home, right, in Clifton. And we rarely spent long periods of time up at the farm. We'd just go like for a day and do what had to be done and then come back. After we girls got married, then we spent our vacations there for 3 or 4 weeks at a time with our children. When we first got the farm, there was no electricity up there, but shortly after. Do you remember what year that was, Bill?
No.
You weren't.
That I don't know.
For a couple of years, I believe we used candles.
Would you spend overnights there at all?
I don't recall going to bed at night with a candle on, so we probably didn't spend the night there. But I actually don't remember.
Just for the record, when were you born? You were born in 1922? No, 24.
That old man was Bill.
Okay.
1925, August 3rd.
25, okay, August 3rd, 1925. Let's see. Well, just to go to my outline here, talking mostly about your parents, what kind of, talk about like language and how language is used in the house. You know, did they use a lot of Czech expressions? Did they?
When, I would say that my mother and father's main goal when they came to the United States was to learn to speak the language. And I don't recall that they would speak the Czech language around us. When my aunt and uncle would come from Garfield, or any other Czech-speaking relatives would come, then they would speak Czech to them. But we really didn't. Czech was not emphasized in our home at all. And I can remember when this one aunt and uncle from Garfield would come, they'd play cards, and the four of them, my mother and father, my aunt and uncle, they'd be playing cards, and obviously they were telling a lot of jokes. They'd be laughing, and the women be, really having a good time. And I thought, boy, I wish I knew what they were talking about, right? I mean, that went on a lot of laughter.
Were there any particular words or phrases that you eventually did learn the meaning of, or no?
Oh, I know more than I think I know. Just recently, when we went to the Czech, Mrs. Hall's husband's funeral, there were quite a few Czechs around there. I said, boy, I haven't heard this much Czech in a long time, right? I'm not saying I understood I basically didn't understand anything the people were saying, but an occasional word I would understand. So, yeah, that's one of them. Did the dupi moki na hanyet?
Was there a lot of that at the funeral?
No, actually not. And dobro noc, good night, right?
That first word that you said, though, is that worth translating, or is that?
Which one? Did the dupi moki na hanyet?
Well, I've been given a rough translation of that.
Mine would be just as rough. Maybe Jan could give you a good description of that. Jan, who always seems to know a lot more about the past than I do, right? Even if she has to make it up a little, right? Make it sound better.
Just before that phrase, there was one word that you said and then he repeated.
Soto, yeah?
Yes.
What is that? Yeah. Yeah, Bill and I use that quite a bit. Like we see somebody and you can't figure out what's wrong with them or something. Soto, yeah, right? Hoping that nobody else knows that around us knows what we're talking about, right?
So it was more like colloquialisms that were passed down. It wasn't anything.
I would say that.
It wasn't really vocabulary.
No, definitely not. And as soon as they got to this country, my mother and father got the newspapers and English newspapers, but they always did get the Czech newspaper too. For all these, maybe there were two different newspapers they got.
That went on.
It just turns off the screen.
And,
it's still recording.
But because they were in business, they felt they had to learn the language, right?
Were their customers mostly? I mean, were there any particular like immigrant population or nationality that they cared to, or?
Well, I think we had a pretty mixed population where we were. There were a lot of people who were Slovaks, right? Some Polish, few Italians here and there. One thing I remember about my father saying about Italians was, "Don't ever marry an Italian." And I shouldn't say any more than that. That's enough.
With some Germans around here.
Yeah, we had quite a few Germans, right?
Olga and Kaufman.
Yeah. It was very mixed, I would say. And of course I remember Wuppa, who lived in the building with us. We had tenants in the building, right? So a couple of the families were German people, right? I think a lot of our customers, though, were Slovak. Especially the people who would, during the Depression, they would come with their books, and my father would write down how much they bought. They would keep the book, right? And most of those people I remember were Slovak. Maybe there were 5 or 6 different families, right? People that we probably never collected from anyway, but my father didn't care, right? Okay. Now what else?
Do you want to talk a little more about maybe just different? Like one of the things that would be really interesting is like how, especially moving from the Depression, especially into World War II, like how did they feel when they heard of things that were happening in Europe? I don't even know if you remember any parts of like or aftermath maybe of World War I, or maybe even your parents speaking of it after the fact, or.
Well, let me say this now. The Depression days for us were probably the best days financially. You know, you come to the bakery, you buy a dozen rolls for 20 cents, and you know, we went to Europe for 6 weeks in 1932, and one of my uncles took care of the business, right? Financially, we were doing well, right? And then after the war started, then that sort of took over our house. Mother and father, very concerned. They both had families living in Czechoslovakia, right? And we always had the radio on to hear Gabriel Heater at night at 9 o'clock, right? Always. How did he open his program, Bill? How did Gabriel Heater?
Good news tonight, remember?
Is that the way he said?
Or he said it's no good news, whatever it was.
Had a very dramatic
Gabriel
voice,
Heater,
right?
Yeah.
So that war did affect us very much, right?
Did things like rationing affect like operations of the bakery?
Well, we people would want to buy sugar from us. Like I don't remember that we ever got any kind of stamps from the people. I think you used to have to use a stamp to get sugar, didn't you, Bob? Do you
Food
remember?
stamps. I mean, you had
Rationing,
ration stamps.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't
Well,
remember.
what I have been told, I mean, obviously I don't remember.
So I know that we didn't want to do it, but I don't know if we once in a while didn't do it for somebody to come begging.
Almost all food was ration.
Yeah, but I do remember
You got a
this.
ration book.
We used to sell butter,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a time when people would hear that we were getting butter. They'd come and ask for some butter, and we didn't have it. And we'd say, we're getting some on Tuesday, say. So then we'd have a line there to get that quarter pound of butter that we give each person that came, right? That's about all I remember about rationing. Right?
One thing I remember Frank mentioning is how, because you had a bakery, you got more gasoline rationed than most people would.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That I
But
didn't.
of course, you
I
probably
didn't
used some more of it for delivery. So.
Yeah. Well, we didn't actually have much in the way of delivering in those days, right? I mean, we didn't have the route anymore, right? Which we had in the much earlier times, right?
Famous picture. Huh?
Yeah, there's a picture of the Kohout bakery.
bakery.
Oh,
the
yeah.
truck. Let's see what else I got here. Yeah, I mean, your parents talk about homeland and their previous lives in Europe at all?
I think only if we asked them questions would they talk about it, right? Not that they... Oh, yes, my mother's other story about how she came to America. Are you interested in that?
Oh, of
Why
course,
she
yes.
came?
Yes.
Her sister Josephine had come earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and she was married and had a bakery in Garfield.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a woman who...
Wait a minute, you're missing something. Your father came over here somewhere.
Oh, yes. Then my father came over. My mother and father, they say, didn't know each other at all in Europe, even though they were within walking distance of each other's
Yeah.
place.
Do you know what year they came over? Like what years?
Well, I kind of figured out that my... what did I say about when my mother came over, though? You remember?
Well, it must have been sometime in 1920, because that's when they got married.
Yeah, 1920, okay. So my father came before that. My father came here...
Remember, Marie has an upgrade receipt. Apparently your mother upgraded on the boat from 3rd to 2nd class.
Oh.
He has a receipt for it?
Oh, you mean
Yeah.
when my mother came over?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's dated 1920. I mean, and you can tell the name of the ship and all that kind
There's
of stuff.
something about our family and saving receipts.
I mean, I guess Ellie had that.
No,
so.
the reason why my father came over in the first place was because, you know, there were all these boys in the family, and only the oldest boy got all the inheritance from the father and mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, my father came from a relatively well-to-do family, right?
Mm-hmm. Was it a farming family or was it
I guess they had a farm, but I know like his father was the mayor of the town for a while. They had a much larger place. We would walk from where my mother lived and where my father lived. And we'd climb over a fence and then walk a little further and finally come to the house that my father had lived in.
Mm-hmm.
and it was very long. That's all I can remember about it.
Was that the house that we went to?
Did you go in that
Number
place?
16?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that being a very long house. Yes.
Yeah. And
Well, it looked like it
outside
had been a smaller house, and I kept on adding to the back.
That
So
could
it
be.
looked like it stretched back.
And just across from it was barns and all. I remember climbing up into the hayloft and all. But and so the reason that the other fellows came, because they didn't want to fight the World War I. They wanted to get out of there because they certainly wanted to go fight with the Austro-Hungarians. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yes.
So they left. So my father was here, and my aunt could see that this certain hussy was after him. Mrs. Baron was her name later on. And so she told my mother, said, you have to come and help me here with the business and the kids. And she used that excuse. Because my mother was almost engaged to somebody. I'm not sure if she was or was planning to marry somebody else. But she came over to help her sister. And 3 weeks later she was married to my father. So that was World War I now, right? Okay, what was your question then?
Let's see. Yeah, we're gonna talk about their home, like and you're gonna tell me the story of how your mother came over.
Oh yeah, that's right. She got on the boat and she was in a little trouble there, right? She was hanging out in the better area instead of in the hole or whatever, wherever the cheapest tickets were.
Steerage, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe they forced her to upgrade.
That could be. That could be.
Maybe.
I think she had to pay up, right? And then she came here, and that was the beginning, right? And that was 1920, right? And then they went to New York to get married. Somewhere there must be some record of the marriage. Do you know, Bob?
Is that the person
If
from
they got married in New York, that's where the record is.
Uncle Ted or Aunt or Marie or somebody had sent out a whole bunch of copies of stuff. So we have a copy of the marriage certificate.
Yeah, is that the one
New
that
York
this really ornate marriage certificate? Maybe I don't think it's me else.
I don't remember seeing that. So.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure that you do get it.
Now, where did you get that from? I mean, from
It's in an envelope that came from the Myers.
The Myers.
I don't remember right now was Marie or was
Uncle Ted had nothing to do with that, though, did he?
I don't know. I mean, it used to be. I used to get these envelopes full of family
Yeah, we
history
all
type
got
stuff.
But what we used to get was not ornate.
Well, but this one had lots of stuff copies of documents.
I may be thinking of something else.
Yeah, so one of those envelopes in that top drawer of the file cabinet is full of these copies of documents.
Okay, so that's what's good.
Including, naturalization certificate as well as citizenship, as well as the marriage certificate and stuff like that.
So that would have my mother and father's handwriting on too, then, right?
Not necessarily.
No?
Well, yeah, probably not. I don't think.
Maybe that's like signs or anything back then.
Well, it's interesting to see, your mother's name change from the marriage certificate to the naturalization, where it was just Francis, but it was, Francisca or whatever
Francisca.
on the wedding certificate.
I never saw
Francisca
those
and
papers.
Bohemia, right?
And you know where Barney came from, right?
One was Ziznicka and one was Nedja.
No, I mean, well, you know where the name Barney came from, where that started.
No.
When they came into Ellis Island, and the guy there wanted to know his name, and he said, let's make it Barney. This Bohemia was too difficult. So now even Barney up in North Carolina is Barney Kohout, right? He got his business card when we were there.
Francisca's last name was originally
Tintera.
Ruben Tintarova, right? Or something like that?
Tintarova,
Let's see. Clothing, I don't know. How did they dress? Did they purchase clothing pre-made? Was there ever a time they made their own clothing?
We're talking about in the United States?
In the United States, yeah.
No, my mother didn't sew.
Okay, so
We had a sewing machine, but
it was always purchased, yeah.
Did you get the sewing machine? No, huh?
Well, we have a sewing machine.
I mean,
We
the
had
one
a
from,
sewing machine here.
no, the old one from the bakery.
We have a treadle sewing machine in our basement, yes.
How's it go? Does it work?
Well, it was converted to electric, so
Really?
the treadle's there, but it doesn't do anything.
Where did that one come from that we had here?
Well, that was the second one, the up-to-date
Oh,
one.
that was, yeah.
I sold it for $25 finally. 35? I'm sorry. You never let me forget it either, right? Every time I ask him to sew something, get that? I ask him to sew.
Yeah, get all that space, but
He says, see, you had to sell the machine. Now he's saying,
Hey,
he sold it.
I'll take that to my room and use it as an end table. I love playing with that treadle.
I'd love to keep things like that. Well, I used to love playing when I was a kid,
You still got the treadle on?
Yeah, it's not the
Yeah.
treadle. It doesn't have the belt that goes from the treadle to the sewing machine because that's just take.
Well, my grandmother had one of them, and I would go visit her, and I would play with that stupid thing for
But my memory is that the wood was kind of splintery, no?
Yeah,
No?
the veneer is probably not perfect. It needs, you'd want to fix that up.
Yeah.
For one thing, my father, for a long while, had it up in the attic, and he had plants on it as well as on every other horizontal surface in the attic.
Yeah.
And occasionally, some liquid would spill.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got that now, though? That machine?
That machine.
Yeah?
Some things just never die, right?
Yeah.
Nice shoes, eh? Yeah.
We actually had it in our living room for a fairly long
Yeah,
time.
but that's when I would play with it when it was in the living room. Let's see. Oh, holidays. Hey, what tell them about one of the biggest parts of a person's culture is how they celebrate the holidays.
You're talking with my family.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, the holidays, of course, were the busiest days or the days before the holidays were the busiest days of the year for us, right?
Yes.
So we had to work hard then, but then we enjoyed the day off. But usually the bakery was open for a while. So, but we had we kids came down after Santa had been there. But somehow I think it was more like midnight we would come downstairs. Santa came a little different time for us, right? And naturally we only would have a couple of presents, nothing like today. We would share like a stove and those little kitchen things, appliances that they had, and a little baby carriage and dolls. But we were very happy with what we got. And I'm trying to remember if we went to church Christmas morning. I don't remember that we did when we didn't really start going to church until we girls could walk to church by ourselves. We could be out alone. And then that's when we really started church going. Plus our mother and father, well, my mother didn't drive and my father was in the bakery on Sundays. Right? So, but thanks to our Aunt Emily, she got us going to church faithfully.
Let's see,
In fact, my father had said to us, why don't you go to that church up the street there? I guess, was that a Presbyterian church?
Yeah.
And so, no, we didn't. I think we went once, but we didn't want to go there, so eventually we were able to walk to church.
Where did you go? Brendan's wasn't up there.
No, we walked to
You go to St. Cyril?
Cyril, yeah. Or we took the bus. If we saw a bus,
yeah.
we'd hop on the bus.
You took a bus down to the end of, at least maybe without Central Street.
Yeah.
So how long a walk would that have been?
2 miles, maybe?
From St. Cyril, maybe a mile and a half, maybe. Well, down to the end of Lakeview Avenue, it must have been close to a mile from the bakery. I don't know, I never measured it.
When we were older, we didn't mind taking a walk, right? It didn't bother us one bit. It kept us out of the bakery a little longer, right? So.
Did you?
Right now I'm not sure I could find St. Cyril's.
Really, Bob?
Forgot.
Maybe you didn't find Fran's house tonight.
Sure it was the right house, you're right?
Well, I was calling her number. I can't remember.
No, okay. Let's see what else.
Wait a minute. Go to the end of Lakeview Avenue. Make a left turn.
Give them the rest.
down to Lexington, and then go over to Lexington to Ackerman.
Hello? Huh? I think you have the wrong number. Wrong number.
You go down to west, down to Lexington, and right over to Ackerman Avenue.
Yep.
Down Ackerman.
And you can't miss it, right?
Huh?
And you can't miss it.
Not now.
So, New Year's Eve, my mother would wake us up at 12 o'clock, and we'd go by the window, and she'd open the window, and we'd yell, "Happy New Year!" and go back to sleep. Of course, in later years, when we were more mature, we stayed up and usually had a party here and there, right?
About what age was it that you started walking to church? You know, you said like until you were old enough to walk. What made you consider old enough to walk to church? It was just the four of you, right? That would walk. Like, would your mother go with you?
Somehow I don't remember Frank going with us. No, just we girls like Emily, Josie, and I. Oh, I could have been maybe 12 or 13, and they were each 1 year older.
And like, what about things like Easter? Did you have Easter was a big bakery time too, right? So you know,
we were busy then too. One thing I remember about Easter, let's see, was it the Saturday? It must have been the day before Easter. Huh? And you absolutely had to have a new hat for Easter. There was no Easter without a new hat, right? So I can remember dashing out of the bakery, getting on the bus and going to Passaic looking for a hat. The Saturday, the day before Easter. Right? I don't remember if I found one or not. But that was very important now.
That's what people.
And we used to dye eggs with onion skins, right?
With onion skins? How do you do that with onion skins?
I think you just get all these onion skins, right? Brown ones. I don't know.
That gives you brown eggs, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
like
we
boil them.
England, that wouldn't.
We boil them.
Brown eggs.
We boil them in that pot with those skins in there, right? You call those skins onion skins?
Like
you were talking about the thick part on the outside.
The brown part.
Yeah. Those were our Easter eggs then.
So if you want purple eggs, you maybe stick like purple cabbage or something like in there.
Yeah, you can use red cabbage. In fact, you can get both purple and red depending upon the acidity.
Exactly. We did experiments like that in 8th grade or whatever. Let's see.
And another one on Good Friday, speaking of Easter, we would go over to we kids would go bring some little pails with us and go over to the brook and bring some water home from the brook. That was something symbolic we did on Good Friday. We didn't drink it, we didn't do anything with it, but that's what we did.
Bring back to the house and so on.
That must have been a European custom or something. I never heard of that one.
But it was never explained?
No, it wasn't that. We didn't need an explanation. We believed.
In what? The water from the brook?
Tradition.
Did you put it in a jar, keep it for a year or something?
That I don't remember. All I remember is we had to do that. Not that our mother sent us any. I mean, we just automatically did it. She probably told us once, and we just did that every year. Well, I think we tried hard to have some traditions because we were in business. We had to hold on to something, right? And then we'd have a lot of jokes about the Easter Bunny. My mother would make some comment. Oh, there he is. Oh, we'd go rush to the window and look out. Never caught him, though.
So about how often would you work in the bakery like every afternoon after school and you go back from school or something like that, or?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
And did you like all through high school, all through I don't know exactly where did you go for college?
I took the 16 bus in front of the bakery and went to Patterson.
So you stayed at home and then what's classes during the day or
day classes.
And then did you help out in the bakery all throughout college too?
Yeah, well, I went 1 year at that August of the first year my father died. I stayed home for a term and then started again in January, I guess, and finished in the usual. I changed my course at that point to teaching in high school, business ed, right?
Well, what was your original major?
Elementary. In fact, well, they didn't have the high school at that time when I was first there. In that half a year, they added that to it, so I switched to that. My father always used to say, well, I wanted to be a nurse. I really thought I would be a good nurse because I liked to take care of her. When my mother was sick, I liked to take care of her. And she would get these terrible headaches every now and then. That would last the whole day, and taking care of her was fine with me. So I decided I wanted to be a nurse. My father said, don't be a nurse, that's too dirty. Be a secretary. So that when they changed the course became available, well, then I took the typing and the bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff after, which I wasn't going to be taking with the original course, right? So that switched to that, right?
Do you know if your parents had any formal education, like up to what point, maybe?
I imagine it was up to the 8th grade. As far as I know, I don't know of any other. But I don't know anybody much smarter than my mother or my father. Maybe my mother more, right? I mean, I had more experience with my mother.
Did you have sort of a casual relationship with your mom? Like, did you just,
No, not casual at all.
Not casual at all. Very formal. Was it, or you just like chat with her or whatever? Or was it like,
Yeah, we were close. I think I was closer to my father, though. Well, I always felt that my father, I'm not saying that my mother didn't feel that way about me, but I always felt my father respected me a lot. He really did. And I always say because he would let me sign his name on checks. I would make out the checks when I was probably no more than 13. I'm sure I was doing it then. And I imitated handwriting. Never checked anything at all. He just trusted me to do it, right? That's respect, right?
Yeah.
So.
He was teaching you to be a forger, what he was doing.
Right. My father was a very, let's see now, he was, considering that he was what they would call a greenhorn, he's very well respected in the town, right, in the city, right. You know, people wanted to be friends with him, right. So, and I guess my mother was sort of like trying to hold him back a little, like when different clubs wanted, like, what do you call that, the Masons or something, which were totally against the Catholic religion, right? They wanted him to join, and the bank wanted him to be on the, what do you call the bank, what, though?
Board of directors, I guess.
Board of directors.
I'm pretty sure his gravestone has a Mason symbol on, doesn't it?
Not his.
Not his. Oh, is it?
The other grandfather.
Oh, okay. Other grandfather, okay.
Or great-grandfather.
Who was the other grandfather?
My father's father.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about Charlie, or the next stone over, right? Charlie Kohout.
Okay.
So,
I have written down here values towards children, language, body language, etc. I'm assuming, like, I don't know, some households it was considered common to, spank your children. Is that sort of thing never?
well, I know I was never spanked. I think Emily could have been, and I don't know about Frank, but I know I was never spanked. Right? Josephine used to sometimes try to boss my mother and father around, right? When she was worried about something that they wanted to do, like go to the farm, and she would try to stop them, right? And but I mean, I wasn't that influential, right? I just figured they knew what they were doing, right? And I do remember Emily getting spanked pretty badly once when she came home with some bad grades, especially in algebra. Fortunately, I never took algebra. In fact, I had my father, because of my father, I changed my course at one point, and I was taking Latin and algebra, which I hadn't been taking before. So I was in those classes for about 2 days. I'm switching back to where I was.
What grade was this in?
I think it was like second year high school. Right? I just was, I'm not going to be taking all this math, right?
So what was like education really stressed, like, you know, really important?
Yeah, I would say so.
Did your parents read much? I mean, I know that certainly Uncle Frank became an avid book collector, at least.
Well, they certainly read the newspapers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And the stock market quotations, yeah.
So they were very, very young. Obviously, were businessmen in general, were business people, but business was sort of a field in general. Was it, did they ever, like, you know, push you or any of your children into business field? I mean, you were a teacher, Josephine was a teacher, and
Emily too.
Emily too.
Hmm.
And what was Frank's formal education? Or?
Well, he started out at Rutgers. Oh, my mother and father wanted him to be a doctor. There came the pushing when it came to him. But he started out, I guess, taking pre-med, right? And then after my father died, he decided he wanted to stay home and help, right, and not go to school. So without telling anybody, basically, I would say, he quit. Oh yeah, another reason he quit Rutgers was because they wouldn't allow him to come home weekends because you had to go to chapel there. Not Catholic, of course, huh? And he resented that he couldn't come home and be in the business on the weekends. So then eventually he left Rutgers and started going to NYU, which is where he got his degree from.
What was his degree? Was it actually in medicine or no?
No, it wasn't.
Like,
he wasn't meant to be a doctor. I mean, that was definitely a case of
it was
parents thinking. That was
undergraduate as far as he went. And
yeah.
I don't even know what business did he go into once he was off on his own.
Kohout bakery.
Okay, so you just continued the bakery and just. I don't know, what year did they close the bakery?
There was some point in time when he was interested in being a
Oh,
stockbroker.
yeah, he
right?
did. He did take some kind of a course in that, right?
No, what year
Was
did
he even working for a firm then, or was he
Not that I know of.
part-time, or just like a
I think the bakery.
student of that?
I mean, when Frank and Veronica left for North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
What was that, 1985 or something, Bill? Or
Yeah, somewhere.
around 85, I think.
Yeah.
What year was Frank born?
22. 22, 23, 24, 25. Then it was all over. Actually, my mother did have a miscarriage after that. They tell me.
Yeah, my grandmother also miscarried too. Was she doing it? Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, I know. What I remember about that, I remember she was upstairs lying in that bedroom. But that was my mother's bedroom, right? Eventually, I don't know what it was at that time. And Josephine and Walt were living on, I guess they were out of Clinton Avenue, probably living there. So she started having this miscarriage, right? And I remember I didn't know much about miscarriages or anything, right? But I remember finding something on the bedroom floor, and I was wondering, gee, could that be something from the miscarriage? Or looked like a piece of potato or something.
Let's see, what year did they get married? Josephine and Walter.
We got married 47.
47.
Yeah.
When did they get married? August or July?
July.
July
Yeah.
6th, I think.
And we got married the next year. Yeah. Well, that was quick.
So 47 and 48, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, is there anything in general that, like, certain values that you think your parents stressed that, like,
Well,
honesty is really important to them, and certain trust or...
somehow we didn't seem to have any question that you would be anything but honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trustworthy, right?
And general attitude is that people generally were trustworthy. And it seems like certainly in your business practice you trusted your customers quite a bit.
Yeah. I can remember one time some woman came into the store talking to my mother, complaining about something, or that she didn't get the right change or something. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
This woman said to my mother, "Mrs. Kohout, you're a liar." Oh my God, you think my mother had her head chopped off or something? She got so upset that this person would say that to her, that she was a liar. Then another time I remember we were in a store in Passaic. We used to do all our shopping in Passaic, Mathers in fact. And the owner of the store came up to my mother and said she wanted to look in her bag, see what she had in this bag she had. And she thought she had stolen something. We never went in that store again. My mother would never, or my father would never think of being dishonest. I think most people were honest then. A lot more people were. I mean, I think people today, I think they're smart if you can get away with something. It's almost to your credit, right?
Yeah.
And I've known people like that. I think it's here.
In all the times I was in public school, I never had a single thing taken from my desk. And it was just a flip-top desk.
Yeah.
That was honors in junior high school, 9th grade. Never had a thing taken.
Oh, did your parents live like a sort of a public life? Were they ever active in politics or anything, or was it like sort of a they were interested but not necessarily active, or you know?
Well, one thing I know, my mother and father never missed opportunity to vote. They were. That's the one thing you had to do. You had to go vote. Right? Even before I voted, I walk over with her when she went to vote, or when she'd go with my father. So. But politics, no, they weren't involved in it. But they were interested in it, but they didn't. Well, they didn't have any time, really.
Yeah, yeah.
The store closed maybe in the earlier days it closed 11 o'clock, and then the bakers were doing the baker shopping. You didn't exactly go walking out. And then it got to be a little better and closed 10 o'clock, right? So there was no time to go and get involved, right? And they kind of believed because you were in business, you couldn't be taking sides about anything. You had to be neutral, right? You didn't talk politics in the store.
I would like the Hitler.
You, huh? How do you like the Hitler? Oh, yeah. Once a man, a German man. Now, what was he anyway? A German Jew or what, though?
I don't know.
Mr. Herman. And he came, he was in the store buying his usual rolls, right? He said to my mother, "And how do you like the Hitler?" And my mother just didn't know how to take that, right? I don't think she said anything to him, as far as I can remember. But Bill and I still use that expression.
So, I mean, did they ever, sort of going back to this, I'm just curious, like, obviously they must have, because the family certainly was in danger during sort of the height of Hitler's activities. They ever, like, I can remember when we went to visit, especially Najib, when we were there, I guess we would have been like my father's second cousins or something like that. Said that the barn on their property was built with money sent from America. And I don't know if you know if like they had like strong contact with homes.
Oh yeah, my mother, we were constantly getting letters from them. And I guess my mother wrote back. I don't remember seeing her doing it, but I imagine she wrote at times, right? But there was a lot of correspondence there. I don't know if it was both places, but you mean Najib that they?
I don't remember which one it was. Nedjek
It must have been the other
or
place.
Dudenitsa or whatever.
But that's not it, yeah. Because Nedjek people didn't need money.
Okay, that was your father's?
Yeah, that was my
okay,
father's
I
side.
can't remember which was which.
I could believe that she would send some money to her brothers there. When we went to Europe, there were no grandparents were left there at all, right? And that was only, when did my mother come here, Bill? 20?
1920,
Yeah.
I think.
So,
So your mother's parents had already passed away
Yeah.
by the time you went there in 32 you said? No.
32 we went. My aunt from Garfield, Aunt Joe, she had been to Czechoslovakia the year before, so I guess that was 31. Then my mother's mother was still living then, so and she died in between that time.
What was her name?
Josephine. Oh, my grandmother?
Yes, your grandmother's name.
I have it written down someplace, but I don't remember now. Your father probably has that information.
Was her name Heiko Bosanai?
That name is familiar to me. So whose name would that be?
I don't know exactly. I know somewhere there's someone with last name Heiko Bos.
Yeah. I remember hearing that name.
Well, one of your uncles' names was William, the oldest one, right? Maybe your father's grandfather was William.
Yeah. I think there was probably a William on both sides, my father's and my mother's.
Probably any anecdotes or any stories, stick out in your memory about your parents,
Some of the anecdotes I don't want to say, right? But they involve other members of the family, like, and it wouldn't be nice, right? Like certain attitudes, like that. One thing I think, just based on my own experience, is how important a father is to a daughter. And these days, they seem to think that fathers are not important, right? A lot of women having babies on their own without a father in the home, right? And I always say that a mother is very important, but a child usually feels that the mother thinks she's okay, right? So, they just take it for granted that the mother's for them, right? But you need that from a father too, and it means even more, and it makes you feel better about yourself.
Wait till your father gets home.
I don't remember hearing that.
Well, your father was home all the time. You wouldn't hear that.
Then there was this one silly little episode. The one time my mother and father were probably having an argument, right? Not that I heard the argument, but obviously there was something going on, right? And I guess I was trying to find out what it was. I was old enough to talk about it, right? And my father said, I don't know if anybody else was around besides me, something about, oh, your mother wants to go and buy underwear and I won't let her. Well, such nonsense, right?
Well, we sort of covered your parents' generation, but I'm more interested now in how you think your general lifestyle has changed from when you were a young child to today, and all the stages in between, how you raised your own children,
In the bakery?
It was all in the bakery, yeah.
A lot in the bakery, yeah. but is that Fran?
No, actually, it is.
Uh-oh. I'm almost getting worried about why Fran wouldn't be here.
She probably went out to get stuff because we were there, visiting us. I'm not so sure. Even though she sent an email that sounded like she was expecting us, when I talked to her, it didn't sound like she necessarily was expecting us to come. Man, I misread it. So I just hope that she didn't feel like she had to dash out and get stuff. As my mother would, my other half, my father would usually send my father out to get stuff, if we called and said, "Hey, we're coming down." Unexpectedly, or expectedly, but
Yeah, I remember sometimes we get there like midnight, 1 a.m. and before you go to bed, here we have some box of Entenmann's, here's some, have some sandwiches, have some rolls,
That's right.
They always had food ready when we got there. So, anything else in response to my question?
Your last question?
Yes.
Which was?
Now, moving on from your parents, how did you, respond to those same issues and same things like, what values did you stress in your children, your relationship with your children, your relationship with family members?
You take that question, though.
I didn't hear it.
Yes,
while I go to the bathroom.
Watch out for the wire.
Okay. What kind of values did you stress in your children, and what kind of...
In our children? Or
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh boy, respect for authority, I guess. I don't know if we did it consciously, but I'm sure that got beat into them. That when we were growing up, that was just taken for granted. You had a lot of respect for adults. Listen to them. Always did what your mother and father told you. When my brother and I would be out playing, we had a dead-end street to play in around the corner. When she wanted us to come home for lunch, she'd just go up and blow the horn in the car. And we'd come running home. Try that today.
Sort of all the same things I asked about, my great-grandparents, I guess, would be, how did you, things like, what kind of expressions did you use in the house, how did you speak to your children? Was it very formal? Does it become more casual as they got older, or,
How do we treat each other in a
Yeah.
family? Oh boy, I don't remember just like chit-chat.
Oh.
Chit-chatting with my mother and father and all. On the other hand, I could ask them anything, but life without TV was a lot different. We used to listen to the radio at night. After supper, my father would sit down and read the newspaper then. I can remember that. My brother and I'd be playing on the floor there, and my mother'd be reading a book or something, and he'd be reading the newspaper. So there wasn't an awful lot of chit-chat going on.
I know, my parents and I talk politics a lot, probably more than most families do, but, like, with you and your children, did you ever just do that? Did you ever just sit down?
I don't remember my mother and father talking too much about politics. My father used to rant and rave about Mr. Roosevelt.
When Bill and I got married, and when his mother and father would come over to our place at the bakery, we had the front apartment there, and they would talk about Roosevelt. That was the first time I ever heard people speak badly about Roosevelt. I mean, my family was all Republican, always. And so you would think that you would hear, but they never spoke badly.
Up for Roosevelt, my father was a Democrat. His whole family was a Democrat.
Oh, yeah?
All the Irish were Democrats in those days. And then Roosevelt came in. I can remember my father, he had originally started working as a secretary, and he used some crazy Pitman shorthand.
Yeah.
It looked like a bunch of chickens running across it. And he'd sit down there and listen to Roosevelt's speech, writing this whole speech down in shorthand. And then I don't know who he was writing letters to, but he'd sit down and he'd type up a letter with his two fingers. He really got into that then. Because he was in the banking business by then. I guess he figured Roosevelt was his mortal enemy.
You imagine like bank freezes, on the one hand, were good for those that were going under, so they had time to make up.
Well, with the bank holiday,
Yeah.
that was an absolute necessity. You know, they were falling right and left, the banks. And it's staying back and take a breath.
Yeah. How do you compare maybe your relationship with your parents versus with your children?
How we get along with our parents, or they get along with us?
Versus how do you and your children, do you think, did you sort of duplicate your relationships? Do you think they were sort of the same, or do you think they became more casual?
I would say we're, compared to our family when I was growing up, you mean?
Yeah, when you're growing up versus the way you
we were here and the parents were over here. There wasn't I don't think there was too much interplay between parents in those days. Well, you respected your parents. But again, you did what they pretty much ran the show, right? I guess we probably gave our kids more leeway than I had when I was a kid. I don't think we were on their back all the time. Dory? No? I would say they were brought up pretty strictly as far as that's concerned.
We tried anyway.
No, we tried, yeah. When I hear our kids talking to their kids, they're like treating them as grown-up adults already. Some of the nonsense they never seem to tell the kid, you got to do this, right? You got to do it. They have to reason with them. We never reason with our kids, that I remember, except when they would ask why, right? I think it's a lot different now than it was when our kids were growing up, and certainly different from when we grew up.
I think some of the things that I see in my grandchildren now, like some of them will ask their mother to get something for them.
Yeah. I can imagine you doing that, or I doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I said, gee, I don't remember asking my mother to do something for me that I could do for myself. Mom, would you get me some milk? Would you get? And when I listened to that, I wanted to scream, right? But and then when the parent will ask the child to do something, it's like the parent didn't say anything, Nothing happens. But the child seems to expect the parent to act, do what the child wants. I mean, that really... Or when I see the kids doing absolutely nothing around the house like that. Then I think maybe our kids were that way too, and I just didn't remember to, but our life was so different from what our children's lives were.
I think that carried over to school too. When we were in school, you wouldn't dare walk back to a teacher. My God, you'd be out of your ear in 2 seconds. Now, at least I don't know whether I can believe half the stuff I hear and see these kids standing up and arguing with a teacher and throwing stuff around the room and having a near riot in a class. What the heck is going on? Somewhere along the line we lost control. But the children must be allowed to express themselves.
I think things are a little too materialistic these days too, right? Every new gadget that comes around seems to be necessary to have.
I don't know, you talked about dressing or anything, but there was a certain amount of discipline in the way you dressed in those days.
I guess clothing was something that sort of passed over. Yeah.
If you were going to school, you dressed a certain way. You didn't just throw on any rags that you pulled off the floor somewhere. You dressed, put a certain type of clothes on, neat looking and so forth. I guess it got on in later years. You might even put a tie on. I don't know. But you had a decent pair of pants and a nice shirt. And the girls all wore nice dresses, and everybody looked. But that took some discipline.
Mm-hmm.
When you went to church on Sunday, you really got dressed up. Tie, shirt and tie. Even as a young kid, I had to wear a tie to church and a suit. Who knows? But they must be allowed to express themselves. We've become a nation of individuals. Everybody out, whatever.
So do you think, like, teamwork and that sort of thing, like, the hard, not necessarily hard labor, but, discipline is something that you tried to instill in your children, or, especially, I assume, through the bakery?
What, a work ethic?
Yeah, work ethic, that's a good way to put it.
Oh, I don't know. I certainly wasn't, I didn't have any of that instilled into me, other than to do what I had, schoolwork, whatever else had to be done. I had plenty of time to play. But in those days, at least for the first 6 years I went to school, we didn't even have any homework to do. Now they're giving kids, starting with the second or third, they get a lot of homework.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm kind of curious more about what things were like since the bakery was such a central part of your growing up and your interaction with your parents, and most of it took place in the bakery, especially since you lived there, in the apartment there. How do you think things changed in the bakery when you were the parents and your children, and my father included, that generation was working in the bakery?
I would say for a while there, it didn't change much, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think our older girls went into it more smoothly, right? Once in a while they resented getting up early on Sunday morning, right? But I don't remember that I would dare be that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there was some change there, right?
And when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Now, was it that you
didn't have any choice at all, did you?
No.
Was it that you didn't resent, or that you didn't bother objecting because you saw no point in objecting?
Right.
And they would vocalize like, "Oh, I want to get up, Mom." It also must have been different. Did you ever see a different type of interaction with your customers, especially going from the Depression to the prosperity of the 40s and 50s, and of course beyond. Did you see a difference in the way you treat customers? Obviously, you didn't have that whole bookkeeping thing was very different, right?
I can remember that, when did we go to Florida, though?
54.
54? Well, anyway, before that, when did that highway come up, though?
Which highway?
46, or...
46 was there long. We used to be Route 6.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know when they widened it, but...
I mean, I can remember that when with the advent of all the supermarkets, that took a big bite out of the bakery business. Things slowed down. They weren't the way they used to be.
Sure.
You didn't find the lines outside the store and waiting, for their turn to come in, right? So I guess there wasn't a need for all the children that were available to work in the bakery. So it was less of a problem to get them to work, get enough kids to work, right? But when they were just us, there was no question that we had to be there. Right? Of course, we always had a girl or two working at the bakery, hired girls, right? So nobody had to really slave that much.
You also hired bakers, right?
Oh, yeah.
And come and do like the donuts and the rolls.
Yeah, they did everything.
I think, like, what kind of stuff did you fix in the bakery? You know, what kind of, was there really like sort of shift in what kind of stuff you made? Was it always the same?
I don't think it changed much. It was always about the same over the years.
You want to sort of run through like what the selection of items was?
Well, you remember all those apples we had from the farm, so we had apple pies that had to be made. Mostly the women went in the back and made those, right? Put them in the refrigerator. Did we ever put them in the freezer, Bill? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No. Pies were just put in the refrigerator. Maybe we'd make 100 pies and use them for the week. Of course, those apples were all picked up at the farm and peeled by a certain William Kenny and cut up by Helen Kenny and her mother, Frances, and other people occasionally, but my mother and I were the usual ones. Bill would go home with the kids and I'd put them to sleep and help them with the first help them with the homework maybe, and then put them to bed. Then he'd come pick me up after the apples were finished. Of course, we took turns, Josie and I. Emily didn't seem to be there much at night, that I can recall. So, in general, I would say being in business has advantages and disadvantages, right? And working, say, with my brother, with his wife, who knew she was going to be in business when she married him, but still resented it, right? And made it a little unpleasant occasionally, right? But when we went to visit them a short time ago, I was glad to see she seemed to have forgotten all that past angst she felt about us, right? Even though she was... Did anybody ever describe what condition she's in to you?
No.
Terrible Parkinson's. We came into the room where they were both in the same room in a nursing home. And I greeted my brother, whom I hadn't seen for over 10 years, right? So,
When was this?
we were there just about a month ago, no, Bill? When did we go to North Carolina, Bill?
Somewhere early February, I think it was.
We went between the funerals, right?
Huh?
We went between all the funerals we've been to. It was after your grandfather was buried, right? Because that gave me the impulse to go see him, right? But
around the 3rd, I think, of February.
So I greeted my brothers and I turned to her bed there. She was just like shaking, like a piece about this long of jelly. I mean, and she looked so small there, right? And could hardly open her mouth to talk. Her voice was very soft.
And her tongue kept going in and out.
Her tongue kept moving, and her mouth was open.
Total wreck.
But she was able to talk, and I could understand as long as I put my ear real close to her. And she was pleasant, right? She was concerned about the people, us and other people there, that they should have a seat, you know, and the boys should take us out to dinner, and, you know, worrying about it. And she spoke about Fran, how nice she was to her son Frankie, right? And Frankie was younger than Fran, right? So I mean, she seems to have like pleasant memories, right? I said to myself, I'll be glad for the rest of my life that we made this trip, right? Because I had deliberated about it for a long time. Didn't really feel up to it, like, and going on a plane is not so easy these days, right? And with high blood pressure and still with his hip and all that. But after your grandfather died, I said, I'm going to go. I feel stupid going for a funeral when you can go when you're alive. And he was so pleased to see us and had such a smile on his face. And we stayed, the first day we stayed there about 6 hours in the room with him, right? And then came back the next morning. We just went there for the weekend, right? Mrs. Hall made all the arrangements for us. It worked out well. But in general, being in business together and owning property together within the family, it's tough.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was always... So that's why I say, while being in the business before we were married and all, it was okay, but once you have other families coming in, it just makes it more complicated, right?
Yeah.
So it was good for my mother and father, and it was good for us when we were there, but after that it got tougher. Not too long ago we were in a barber shop on Valley Road, which is the same road that St. Philip's Church is, right? And there's a man there who looks like Santa Claus. He's got the beard and all, right? And his father had the barber shop, so this place is really old, right? Place is filled with pictures from way back, you know, groups of people and all kinds of little antiques and and we went there just recently, and a couple other old men were there, and so this barber, also known as Santa Claus, said, you know who this lady is? The guy who's sitting next to me said, no, comes from one of the finest families in Clifton. So I thought to myself, well, you don't know how good you are until you're old enough, right? And this person just said that. I thought that was so generous of him, right? Well, then when he told my name, and oh yeah, I know, I used to go there. So I mean, you get a lot of nice things said about you after you've led a good life, right? Now, a while ago, we were at a meeting in the church, right? I'm sitting next to this woman. We were having a little supper there, right? And then I'm getting friendly with her, and we're exchanging names and all. And when she found out that I came from, oh, and I gotta go home. I'm gonna tell my husband I was sitting next to a Kohout. What's going on here?
You're famous and you don't even know it.
Right. You don't know what kind of reputation you've built up all your life, right? Which I think is important, right? Good reputation doesn't hurt. So I know that that my father and mother were always known to be good, honest people, right? Except for that woman who told my mother she was a liar. You know, after your grandfather died, I was lying here on the couch one morning. I had gotten up early and I came downstairs for a while. And this is a few days after the funeral, I found myself, my eyes were filled with tears, right? I wasn't crying out loud or anything. And I was just thinking about Walter and Josephine and the children. And I thought to myself, Josephine and Walter really were two good people who brought her 4 good kids, you know. And it just made me feel like happy, like just thinking about it. So it settled my mind, like, you know, I'm thinking about each one of the children, how good they are, right? And they really did a fine job. Now, what was that example, would you say?
What's up?
Would you say that wasn't a good example, they said?
Yes, yes.
So that's why I feel like you asked, did you do this, did you that? I don't know, I think we just lived with our kids, and I guess we try to do it by example. I know that it's not always enough. It requires a certain amount of preaching, right? But once in a while you come out with some statement, I guess, but mainly I think it's just living, right? Living and doing. So another thing that Miss Fran had said, that she was almost felt joy that her mother and father were together. You know, that made me feel good, right? Certain things that people say. Like when we went to a funeral for another Walter Grossman, Bill's friend from work that we've known for years and years. And when the daughter, Ellen, was introducing another man to us, right? And she said about Bill, this is my father's best friend. She called this guy, Walter Grossman's best friend. And I said, that's a very nice thing to say to somebody, right? And somebody that you didn't socialize with regularly. We saw him a couple times a year. You went to their house, they came here. And then I realized that fellow, that Walter, and this guy were two really good people again. I'm just noticing good people, right? And they were always good, right? It's not that they got good when they got old, right? Yeah. Just good. And Walter Grossman, 2 kids, another 2 good kids.
That makes sense. Family tree. I grew on the train. There's me.
Yeah.
And my siblings. There's mom. There's dad's side. And there's other people at the interview. And so I talked to Anne Fleischer. And anything more you know about him and how that would be great. And Grandma Kohout. And your parents.
I'm hanging on, right?
Well, Bill, if you walk over there, watch out for that wire.
I'm not going that way.
I can unplug it.
I go around the other way.
No, I think that's all I've been
It's funny, no matter how old you get, you still come to some realizations, you know, about life, right?
It's short.
Life is short, it really is. Because there's a whole period of time there that just went like that. And only now I'm sitting back and taking notice of it, like, right? Like, when I think 75, how could I be that old? Where did it go? Where is it? Just amazes me. And I know some people are even older.
Yeah.
But time has been flying a lot more quickly lately in the last few years. And I hear that from everybody. Everybody tells us there must be something going on. Look into that, right?
Okay.
When you get back to school.
The world's going fast.
Okay. Let's leave that there. We had a guest speaker in my global environment class the other day. He was a professor, Dr. Bartlett, 78 years old, from Massachusetts. And he was, talking all about his thesis for his talk was single greatest limit to humanity and our greatest fault of humanity is our inability to understand the exponential growth function. And he's talking about how people talk about, growth is necessary and growth is vital to our survival, and yet people don't realize that if you have 3.5% growth, that means you double whatever it is in 20 years. So if the world population has 3.5% growth, which seems like a very small number. That means we go from having 6 billion people today to having 12 billion people in 20 years. Now, I don't know about you, but where are we going to put 6 more billion people? I find it hard to fathom that we have 6 billion people on Earth now. I remember as a child talking about 4 billion people, and within my lifetime.
I think when I was
2 billion people.
about your age, the population of this country was about 150 million.
Yeah, it's like 240 million now.
Yeah, that they know of anyhow. Right. But you're right, I don't know where they're going to not only put them, how they even possibly begin to feed them. After people are starving out.
Look, your father's wide awake now.
I would say wide, but okay. So, did you want to ask any questions or help me out here? Anything you want to know about?
Probably. I haven't heard any. I should have.
Come on, think fast.
Let's see. Thinking fast.
You're actually better at asking more questions about your mother. That is, technically, I'm supposed to follow my genetic ancestry, so I'm supposed to sort of more include my direct grandparents, and maybe have more questions to ask about them. Because later I'm going to ask you a lot.
Just take a look at the role of women in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's totally different now than it was when we were growing up. Or even when our kids were growing up. Like that was just getting started then, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, I
We
remember...
just take it for granted the women would stay home and the men would go off to work. That was it. That was the way the world ran.
I remember at one point you said to me that for the girls in your family, for you and Helen and you and Emily and Josephine, it wasn't really an option to go away to college. Like, you went to the local, Montclair State, whatever that was.
Patterson State.
Patterson State, and whereas Barney Uncle Frank was given the chance to go away if he wanted to. And I don't know, all of your daughters went away to college, right? Or did some of them stay at home, or?
Did any of them go away?
No.
No.
Did they all stay at home?
Yeah, they all stayed home.
Did your sons stay at home? Did they? I know.
Well, Paul went to West Point.
Yeah. What about Billy?
Billy, that wasn't college, but he went to some music school up in Boston, I think.
We went to some pharmacy school over in Brooklyn for quite a
Brooklyn,
while.
yeah. Right.
Do you think education was stressed differently for your children versus you? I mean, was a real career stressed for both the girls and the boys?
I don't think we ever told any of them they had to go to college. As far as I know,
No, I think we just took it for granted that they would go. That was never questioned at all.
They all seemed pretty willing to go, and they all sort of knew what they wanted to do and had ideas of what they wanted to do.
Whatever they wanted to do with school, we never told them what to study as far as what line of study to take.
So,
Pat's the only one that took any postgraduate work that I can think of. Except Paul went to law school.
Want to run down a list of what each child does? Or you want to run down a list of what each child does and like what they do? So, see, Marilyn's
up to her eyeballs in real estate.
Yeah.
Karen works in an office dealing with computer. As near as I can figure out, they answer customers' complaints or problems on their computer systems or something like that.
Or tech support.
Pat's an adjunct professor in Barnard over in Columbia University. Janet's a CPA. Paul's a lawyer. Billy works in a lens scraper. He's the manager of a store. And let's see, what is Mary doing? She was in real estate for a while too. She's not doing that right now, is she?
No.
No.
What's trying to say? You have a phone. Is it phone or using it?
Yeah.
No computer bugs though. Or bugs. Although they all use them.
Yeah. And of course, you've got you, computer buff, whatever, and 2 lawyers, and then what does this friend do these days?
Well, for a long time she worked for Prudential. She was in
Fran?
Yeah.
She worked in claims.
Yeah, the processing.
In the claims department, she didn't process claims. She was trying to keep all the rest of them on a steady course.
Right. Well, it was. Yeah, it wasn't the processing claims, but somehow like setting standards for claims or deciding how
She was
to handle
in the
claims.
corporate where I was working. The corporate claim how to set standards and whatnot, or settle specific cases and whatnot.
But now
They
she's
weren't
with the writing, right?
They weren't in the trenches
that, right?
handling the
What does she do now?
14 million claims
Right,
that came in.
now for the city of Cedar Grove does all the writings that they, and I guess it's more for the school system, I think.
Well, that's what you're going to do for ESS, or
Huh?
Yeah. Well, I can also I can talk to her about this tomorrow too. But I also want to ask you, did you ever actually? You said you got your bachelor's in teaching. Did you got your master's in teaching as well too?
Yeah.
Did you ever actually go into the classroom, and how long did you?
I only started subbing after my mother died, and we were tossed out of the bakery. So I needed something to do. So our kids were at the high school here, and one of
You
them.
used to do quite a bit of that.
I used to do. I went there as just as an aide, like just helping out, like once a week with this one particular teacher. And then once she suggested maybe you should be a substitute and get paid for this. Signed up for it, and I did quite a bit of subbing, right? And I did it at St. Philip's too. After Emily died, especially, because she used to sub quite a bit there.
What year did your mother die?
My mother died in 75.
So how old was she then?
I think she was 78. Right, Bill?
I think so.
She was born in 96.
Huh?
She was born in 96, right?
96?
She would have been 79 the year that she died.
When was her birthday, December?
December 16, though.
And did my grandmother what did she do as did she ever actually teach in the classroom, or?
She taught before she got married. She was teaching in number 11 school right across the street from the bakery, where she had the good fortune to meet Elsie, who introduced her to her brother. So that was her life. So then
that was the same school you guys went to, right?
Right.
Across the street.
Yeah.
And
And
she had Elsie as a teacher, as you know?
Yeah. So anyway, I guess she taught 2 years, I think, because she was there the first year. Then she met Walter, and then she was pregnant, and she was still working there till June, I guess, right? I guess she taught for 2 years. I could be wrong, but I would suggest that every day of your life you write down what you did that was important that day, right? Otherwise you'll forget.
So is that anything else? Anything else you want to share? Anything else that's aching to tell me about?
Just how to get out, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that I remember Frank talking about at times, from time to time, or Ray Grauer told me, that your father at one time had like plans for a bowling alley or something.
Yeah. That's
He had
true,
all
too.
kinds of plans. You're going to buy a wheat farm up in Canada?
But if you remember the bakery, right? And then across the street, the next block up, there's a corner there. There was a corner there, still there, but it's built on. And my father bought that property, and he was planning to put a bowling alley up there. That was before there were any bowling alleys on Lakeview Avenue.
All right.
Yeah.
Where was he going to put that empty lot?
Yeah.
It wasn't big enough for a bowling alley. Of course, don't tell him that.
Maybe
right?
bowling alleys didn't have to be as big as...
You mean the one that we used to have to go up and cut the grass on?
Yeah, right, that's the one. Okay. Well, my father did do a lot in a relatively short life, you know. With the
Bought the farm.
properties he bought, right? Did well in the stock market, right?
So he did stocks too?
Oh, yeah.
Did you get involved in stocks after the Depression, or?
I guess it was after the Depression.
Buy them up when they're nice and cheap. That's good.
Whenever Mr. Miller came around, Paul Miller. Paul Miller was his stockbroker, right?
Probably at the time that he was at the crash, he probably wasn't invested, or probably didn't even have that much in the way of savings.
Probably not.
It would have been too early in his
Yeah.
career.
So Paul Miller was his stockbroker, and he was on the Board of Education in Clifton.
Mhm.
So when one of us girls graduated from the 8th grade,
Miller was on the Board of Education?
yeah, at least 2 out of 3 times anyway. He was the one who came to the 8th grade graduation to congratulate the children and all and hand out the diplomas, right? So when I graduated, and I guess Josephine graduated, we got a bouquet of flowers presented to us on the stage, right? From Mr. Miller, right?
Yeah. I don't know if the tape is still taking it.
Oh, this is half stop here. Flip it.
Didn't you write the other one, or is that?
Oh, that was just the first time. Nothing big. I'm gone.
And then every Christmas Eve day, Mr. Miller would come to the bakery with his children. I guess my father would give him something. I don't know. I guess money. I don't know for sure. And we always had our Christmas tree up, so we always had to close the door so the kids wouldn't see it because Santa Claus had to put the tree up that night. Right?
The screen is dusty again.
I'm sorry.
You're sorry for what?
Dusty
Oh.
screen. Okay, it's been going for 1 hour 32 minutes and
So I guess we missed about half an hour on this day,
So Mr. Miller would come and play cards with my father, and Mr. Fred Friend, the lawyer, would come too, and I would always stay up late to see that they had refreshments, right? Give them drinks and make the coffee and later, right? That was my job.
Still through today, right? Always making coffee.
I still make watch him. Look, I'm telling him to watch out for his wires. And then when we built this house, we went to Mr. Friend to what, Bill?
What, the Israel friend you mean?
Yeah.
He just looked over all the papers for it.
Close the deal or whatever.
The deed, for the deed to the property, all the contract to build the house and so forth. A lot of paperwork that he went over. I think when we were growing up, the life was more hemmed in by custom, or whatever you want to call it. Everybody seemed to know what they had to do. Everybody did just went by the customs of the time. Now, it's a lot different. Everybody's doing their own thing. Like my mother would never go out shopping unless she got all dressed up, put a hat on, a coat, and maybe even gloves, and just to go down to the grocery store. Just so little things like that for them. Life is much more, what's the word?
Loose?
Well, it's certainly a lot less hectic than it is nowadays. But society seems to have many more restrictions than they do nowadays. Nowadays,
they seem to show quite a bit on TV. These women, married women with children, getting ready in the morning, right? Getting the kids up, giving them breakfast, making them learn.
You
They're not
don't
going to live there
remember doing
anymore.
that, do you?
No.
I mean, you used to make sandwiches for the whole week, I think, didn't you?
Put them in the
over at the
freezer,
bakery, you had the whole table full of slices of bread, and one had to make all the sandwiches and put them in the freezer for the week, right? I don't remember any hectic madness getting the kids out to school.
Well, you had gone to work early.
I guess I had gone to work already. What time did they have to? I used to get out early.
Then they would walk down to the corner to get the bus, right?
Yeah.
The school bus. And I didn't have to be at the bakery at a certain hour. When I was ready, I called Frankie and he came for me.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that hectic, right?
It's funny, like especially all through like high school, my father's always been very, very, gets up early, but very leisurely in the morning. And yet, I didn't have to be at work at a particular time, just, had certain responsibilities to take care of throughout the day. If they had a meeting or something, that was one thing, but, and yet I had to be at school. I had to be at school at 8 o'clock, and I remember a lot of times through high school I get in trouble for, being late for school or not. And it seems like sort of the same thing, and I was like, I would have liked to have had a more leisurely morning, and not have to worry quite so much about deadlines and all that, but, it was like, the school really, and also at school was really stressful. You have to be here at this time, very structured in terms of time.
You found the cup. I put it in the system. You want something to eat with that?
Okay. That's plenty to eat today.
So you should be the poster boy for somebody who lost a lot of weight and kept it off, right?
Yes, sir.
I don't think I know another person.
I should take Fergie's job,
What's Fruggies?
Fergie, yeah.
I don't know. I think she has the name.
Duchess of York.
Fergie. Oh.
Yeah, she's a spokesperson for Weight Watchers.
Oh, yes.
How about Monica? She was a spokesperson for some diet too.
Yeah,
It's a Weight Watchers
was it Weight
lately.
Watchers? Or maybe it was Jenny Craig, I think was what she was.
Yeah, that Fergie accent kind of irritates me. She ought to start talking like an American, as long as she's making her money here.
Weight Watchers.
Weight Watchers.
Yeah, it seems to be the general attitude, though, that your parents especially had. It's like you come to America, you're American. It was.
Yeah, I would say so.
It's very much a thing of assimilation. It's not necessarily an assimilation, but just like adjustment, adaptation. Your family seems to adapt very well to the time.
Yeah, I think they definitely did feel that way, right? They were quite. I think they kept all the good characteristics of Czech and just added on to with the good old American ones. My father had a lot of his clothes made by a tailor. Why, I don't know. If he was so hard to fit or what, but Mr. Samek made his clothes. Well, there's another Czech man, maybe he just wanted to give him some business.
No, and I know especially partially because all three sisters live on this street, but also Mrs. Hall. Was there anyone else in the street that was of Czech background?
I don't know of anybody else. Now, what are the O'Lears, though? What nationality were O'Lears?
I thought he was Russian.
Russian, no. And then Velickis are
Slavic.
Slovak, yeah. Nick is
Nick is
what?
Helen. Probably Russian.
Yeah, Helen's Russian.
What was Lottie? Slovak?
I think she's Polish.
Polish?
Doesn't she seem more Polish to you? I don't know her
Yeah.
maiden name.
What was her maiden name, you know?
I don't know. I don't know if I ever knew. Lottie O'Lear, that's all I know. The O'Lears, they lived across the street. They moved away. They moved down to Whiting, New Jersey, which is pretty far down there.
Pretty far down.
And now Lottie, Helen Belicki, that she's related to them, right? That's her brother. O'Lear. So now Helen's a widow, and she's alone in the house, right? And these two left. So I think there was a little trouble when Helen and John's father died, and he got a lot more out of the estate, right? So they talk, but I don't think they feel that close anymore, right?
Do you ever feel that your parents were more comfortable with other immigrants?
No.
They were just comfortable with
my father especially was very comfortable with all Americans, right? Successful Americans. And then my father would hire some people to work at the bakery that needed help too, you know, and they were not necessarily American, right? In fact, even one Italian, I remember. We had a girl working in the bakery named Norma Zangrando, and her father came to work at the bakery for a while, just cleaning up, that kind of work. Yeah. So I guess he was helping somebody out there. In fact, he used to come and make, he taught us to use dandelions for salad. You know, just go pick them out outside any place. And we would have dandelion salad.
An article in that magazine about dandelions, if you want to read.
Oh, yeah? The kind that you eat, you mean?
Yeah, the kind you eat. One guy there, I was talking about, he grows them professionally. He grows on a small farm up in Maine somewhere. He cans them and distributes them in New England somewhere.
Well, when you can
But
them,
he
that
says
means
they're
you have
bitter.
to cook them a little, right?
Yeah, he said they're bitter.
Oh, yeah, dandelion is bitter. That's why you have to try to get it nice and young, right?
Yeah, well, they're still fresh green.
Before they have the yellow flowers, right?
Yeah. I can remember, even around here, like along the parkway down here, where they grow them by the millions, right?
Yeah.
You see some Italian people going down there with a bag and picking dandelions and stuff like crazy. Fill up the whole bag. I don't see them doing it anymore.
Probably very healthy, too, without the
Huh?
gas. They're probably very healthy without the gas fumes
Yeah.
blowing on them all the time.
Anything else I can ask?
This is somebody said a kinder, gentler time, right? Of course,
Speaking
my
about...
mother and father probably thought theirs was a kinder and gentler time than the one when we were growing up. I keep thinking, though, just when my mother and father, especially when they were growing up, in the apartment they lived, they had gas lights, no electricity, gas lights. And they go from that type of living to my mother lived to see them putting people on the moon. Well, that's an awful expanse of change in one lifetime.
But she took it very naturally.
There were
though,
no
right?
automobiles, so there were horse and carriages in New York City running around. My father lives over, or not over, but right next to a firehouse, and when the fire bell would go off, out with these 3 horses come charging out, dragging what used to be I guess it was the pump, but it had a fire on a big steam boiler on it that would generate the steam. The smoke would be pouring out of that thing, and these horses, that must have been some sight. 3 big horses come running out of it, clanging on the old cobblestone streets, clankety clank clank.
Speaking about the Czech heritage, we did go
What a
to
change in one lifetime.
little ferry which had a large number of Czech people living there, and we go there for special occasions like they have dinners and dances, and we did that a couple times a year. That's the only affiliation I can remember with Czech people. Right?
I think it's music. What kind of, do you guys ever play music in the house? Especially when you did have electricity later on, and there was phonographs.
We always had music in the house, and Emily and Frank both played, Emily the violin, Frank the cello, and we always had classical music, right? Which I think Emily and Frank were fortunate that they had that, because that added something mostly to Emily's life. She was in the orchestra in school and got to play for different occasions, right? And added a lot to her life, I think. But of course we didn't have any music. The songs those days were nothing like the music these days, but we basically had classical music, right? Emily and her violin teacher, Professor Tatsawa, came. Right? You never knew him, did you, Bob? Never knew.
I don't think I know him, though.
Now, did you have favorite radio programs?
Favorite radio programs? What were they, Bill? You remember?
Mr. Keene, Tracer of
Lost Person.
Lost or Missing Person or something like
I think it was Lost Person.
that. Lost Person.
Well, I think.
I never listened to that. Used it, but
I used to listen to it, yeah.
I can remember as a kid listening. There was a whole bunch of programs around 5 o'clock or something forth, but they were only 15 minutes long in those days. You know, like
Jack Armstrong?
Jack Armstrong and one was about some cowboy out Maverick out west. Buck Rogers. There were about 4 of them right in a row. They took up the whole hour. They were only 15 minutes. But I always listened to those things. They're all radio.
I can remember this. I would like one particular show. I'd come sit, listen to the nobody else would be in the room, right? You know, just
sit there, stare at the radio.
Nobody else cared about it but me, right? So it must have been not had too much interest in too many people, right?
My mother always listened to the news at 7 o'clock at night. I remember that.
We did like to listen to the boxing matches, right? When Joe Louis was having his fights, right?
Yeah.
We always listened to those, right?
So who were you rooting for?
Joe Louis. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
Is he living? No?
I don't think so.
And there was Max Baer, right?
A lot of them.
What was the Schmelling's first name?
Max.
Max Schmeling, yeah?
Yeah. So Schmeling and Lewis fight was real big.
How do you know?
Well, they took history.
My goodness. And that's what they teach in history?
History. Well, I mean, it's defined as one of the big turning points in public opinion on isolationism during World War II. And when Schmeling and Lewis first had their fight, many Americans were rooting for the German just because, you know.
He wasn't black?
Yeah, just because, you know. And because he was German, a large portion of the American population was German, rather. And then, you know, once stories of what Hitler was doing and things like that started really filtering back, people knew they were true. You know, they were rooting for the American. They weren't rooting for this German, regardless of color. You know, sort of.
Yeah, I always rooted for Joe Louis. And my family, too.
Remember Tony Zale?
I heard the name.
Huh? I think that was a shortened version of another name. He might even been a Czech or a Slovak.
Oh, really? Why don't you tell me? I would have liked him then.
But what he can't remember the name of that big food fight. One of those classic. That's when boxing was boxing, and what instead of the nonsense they got nowadays.
Well, no one biting anyone's ears off, right? But
your ears were safe when you were fighting them.
that's what college level. Let's see. Anything else, Ben?
I'm sorry, I should have all sorts of things to ask, but I'm kind of tired tonight, so it's been very interesting to hear it, though.
Yeah.
So we used to go to the seashore in the 30s, in the summertime, usually twice a week. And one day, for some reason, we stopped. We were looking for a place to stay overnight. Couldn't find any place. So I don't know, we just pulled into the woods someplace. I guess we were going to have some sandwiches or something. And a policeman came along and chased us away. So then, I think it was at that point that my father said he was going to look for a place of their own to buy, a summer place to buy. So we always believed that's why we bought the farm, right? That was our belief. Which was not a farm then, of course.
it was also a pretty good decision to dam up the river and make a lake there, right?
Yeah.
It was pretty nice.
Pretty big. You know how that was bought, right? It was a tax sale, right?
No, what was it?
Mr. Maybe up the road a piece couldn't pay his taxes. And he
Okay, see, when I told John about the Maybes the other day, he's like, "You're lying to me. There's no person named Maybe. What are you talking about?" I think you're just making that up. I'm like, no, Dad told me about some family called the Maybes.
Who said this?
John.
John didn't believe her.
No, but
Yes, so
wasn't
continue.
Shaquilla married to a
Yeah.
woman?
Shaquilla was
one of the babies, right?
Yeah, one of the homelier ones.
Yeah,
There's another house, the little property, that little house we sometimes dug through the ruins of.
Yeah.
Those were the Stobies.
Yeah.
Stobies were involved as well as the Maybes.
Yeah, and John knew about the Stobies and the foundation looking like they had there's like
Well,
a
Stovey
an
had a
Afghan
place
there.
down, he had a lot there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
were you up there almost to the line where Parker's farm, there was a foundation there. I don't know what the heck was there.
Yeah, there was like
It was
this.
very small.
There was like debris from I guess the house just like fell or something. I was just like.
Well, it's not
Well,
even
that
that
was
big.
Stobies' house,
It's Stobies' house, okay.
the other side of the property.
Okay, and the other side there's like a big pit there now.
Right.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
a pit.
and that's what I was telling John about. There's a pit there.
If that was a foundation of some kind, it was a stone.
It's not that big.
No, very small.
Yeah.
But if you look
Like
at
a shed or
but if you look
something.
at the Stobies' house, it wasn't that big either.
No,
It didn't have much of a foundation
that
either.
was
So it's probably a house about that size, same size.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah.
That's possible.
In other words,
Of course, it didn't have on it.
A summer cabin. So.
That's Stovey's place.
Stovey's place, is that where that fence is now? That property, there's a fence there?
No, there's no fence in front of Stovey's.
The place I'm talking about now is past our place. I mean, going home.
Well, it's towards
It's almost totally grown over now.
the West Milford,
No.
before the bend in the road.
Okay. Now, that property where the fence is now, you know, that long, do I
That's
need
a
fence?
gate.
Gate. That used to be our property now.
It still is. I mean, it always was. That goes down to the lake.
No, I'm talking about beyond that.
Oh.
Closer to West Milford.
There's a gate there, there's a road that goes down. If you keep going, it'll bring you to the bridge by the
I know
lower.
that though.
But there was also a gate.
Huh?
There's a gate, in fact, the same kind of gate by the
Stobies?
Stobies, but I don't know if that's still there.
I don't know either.
That's the place where you would see a horse coming out every now and
Oh,
then.
that's, huh?
A horse would be, people with a
That's
horse.
down past the
But
property line.
that used to be our place. They bought that, no? Wasn't a piece of property sold?
No, only to
No,
the state for
no.
the entrance
That
of the
piece.
park.
No? Okay.
Okay, so the piece of property that they
That
sold-
end of the
they
property, that's one of the few places the line is pretty straight. It goes right down, up the lane, up the hill. It doesn't bend around at all.
But
I mean,
that's,
right at the town line, which is also the county
Yeah.
line, there's a
There's
There's a driveway going out back,
Right.
and there's something in the back there. I don't know.
I don't know what that is. That's where I think you used to see the horses coming up.
yeah, that's what I think I mean.
whatever.
He
I haven't
said.
seen
Yes,
those
you were
horses
telling the
lately.
story about the Maybes and how we got the farm.
Okay. So maybe he couldn't pay his taxes, so there was a tax sale. And my father bought this place for $3,200?
I don't know. A store, you put it
Yeah,
down.
$3,200, right. Okay.
The back taxes, that's all you had to pay.
And that was probably 1938, though?
I think so.
Okay. You
Well,
ought to
I
be able to
always
find
heard
that
of
out. Or you. You got the internet. And immediately worked on the lake, you know, made the lake, made a road around the woods,
Mm-hmm.
started building a house. While the house was going up, my father died, also. Is that right or not?
Yeah, he died
No.
43.
Okay, that's
Didn't he?
Yeah.
here. But it seemed like something happened when the house was... Oh, no, Mr. Richards had the heart attack. He had a heart attack.
Oh, yeah?
So then his partner had to finish the place, right? That's what it
Alright.
was. Got a little mixed up there. So, and then when did the garage get made, do you know?
Like the year
It's no
Marilyn.
longer a garage.
The first, Marilyn was about,
I can remember that.
she was less than a year old, I guess, when that summer. She She was born about 51, somewhere around
Yeah.
52, I think,
Yeah.
51 or 52.
And
Because I remember that when we went up to vacation, we had breakfast on the porch on that house.
That's when it was a house, huh?
When it was a house.
It wasn't a garage anymore.
You want to know when that was made a house? I'm telling you when it was.
Okay.
That summer, when Marilyn was still a squirt.
So that was probably
Before
55
Karen
then.
was born.
55 then, right?
Hmm?
1955 then.
What are you talking about? Marilyn was born in 51 and Karen was born in 52.
Okay, but I thought that we had come back from Florida that summer. That's what now?
Yeah, when did you guys live in Florida?
54 to 59. When we had the breakfast on that porch, it was after when the house became the garage became a house.
Exactly.
So why couldn't that be 55?
Because Karen wasn't born yet.
And we can't
We
have
only
breakfast.
had Marilyn, 50, am I missing something?
See what I mean? Write down everything every day.
Particular dates are not that important.
It was the summer after Marilyn was born.
Or just keep the receipts.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep the dates. And we found like tax records from like the 40s and we during
It's a good thing I kept the
He had a lot
receipt,
of
Bob.
records.
Yeah.
Bob, it's a good thing recently that I kept the receipt. When the city was,
That was straight for the sidewalks. Right?
you son of a gun, you must have been listening.
Oh, you told me about it.
About the sidewalks?
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
And I brought out my receipt, a little card, right? Sure. Oh, okay, then all right. We got our money back, the
We keep
$3,000.
those.
We could have bought another farm. If only we had a lawn, huh, Bill?
Yeah,
Don't put any trees on your front lawn.
at least not sweet gum.
Not sweet gum.
Well, it's any kind of tree. I mean, if it's not an ornamental, small ornamental, it's going to be
All those
disruptive.
trees they planted down here, they're not going to get too big, I don't think. Or very wide, for that matter. But they planted them all between the curb and the sidewalk.
Oh, speaking of snowing,
Which is very
we have
interesting.
about that much of our, our little crabapple tree. About
Mhm.
that much of it doesn't snow.
Wow.
There's about that much of our Christmas tree that doesn't snow. No, I mean, it's part of the reason why it's that high is that's where the snow blower throws the snow, so it's not just falling there. But
Not to mention the caramel tree is very short. I forgot when we planted. We planted it, what, 2 years ago, right? Or
yeah, it's the second year in spring.
So do you miss home a lot?
I kind of do.
Yeah.
I'm not missing the people, I'm missing the physical place, but I was being able to go into Boston, you know?
What did you like most about going to Boston?
Visiting jobs for one, you know, sort of. It's just a nice place to be. Let me just walk around. And, Syracuse is like, it's very much an industrial town rather than a historical place. So it's like, you know, it's kind of run down in spots. It's very utilitarian city in terms of its design. Boston has beautiful architecture and, you know, lots of also I guess the subway makes everything very convenient. So, you know, Syracuse has a really weird convoluted bus system, and you know, the T makes everything really nice and convenient.
What did Syracuse used to be famous for? Anything at all? Industrial-wise?